Ladies and gentlemen, the great David Hawkes and why user stories suck. And David, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Even though it's virtual, we're gonna make this thing work. So um, the premise of tonight's talk is, user stories have been around 20 years now, and it solves some really good problems around, okay, who are we building it for? Why are we building it? But there's some flaws, and that's what, and I think there's some things that we can do now, and we've learned over these last 20 years so that we can expand on that. So that's kind of the premise that we're going to be working with today. My background, I am a certified Scrum trainer, certified enterprise coach, and so I split my time between teaching like certified Scrum Master, certified product owner classes, advanced classes. But I also spend a lot of time with leaders and helping coach and through transformations. So recently been working with a major airline in your area and through their transformation. So I split time in both sides, not just training, not just coaching, but both of those aspects. Some of y'all might have seen me speak before, and there's a framework that we've built around transformation called Path to Agility. And what it really does is helps organizations who are on, all of us are somewhere in an organization that is trying to get better, getting more agile. And in today's times, we need to be more agile and adaptable than ever. We look at, when we talk about this kind of path to agility, there's practices we would implement early in an organization's maturity, and there's different practices we may implement later from an agile maturity perspective. I say all the time, like, we can't go from 0 to 100 miles an hour overnight. We've got to go from 0 to 10 to 10 to 20, 20 to 30. And the reality is some of the practices we implement early, we're going to throw away when we get somewhere else. You maybe heard, like, new teams, Scrum is a better solution. Really mature teams, Kanban may be a better solution. And so those are different things. And what we're going to be talking about today is not the basics in the beginning, right? User stories is a very good technique to use when we don't write good requirements that are very user-centric, when we don't write good requirements that articulate the value, right? So user stories can be really good at putting some guardrails to say, let's make sure we identify the user, let's make sure we aren't over-specifying the how, and let's make sure we talk about the why. What we're going to be talking about today, this is the next drill down into the path to agility. We're going to be talking about some techniques that help us in the last stage of path to agility, which we call the adapt stage. So this is when organizations are trying to work with the most agility, the most responsiveness to the market, and respond in a world of, we call this a VUCA world, right? It's volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, and complex, right? This world we live in, and I used to have to explain that to leaders, and with our current coronavirus situation, leaders get it now, right? Like we're in a VUCA world. And as product owners, you've got to navigate this, right? Like, we've got more uncertainty. Think about the things in your backlog. Do you know exactly the right things to build, right? There's more uncertainty than ever, right? We have more data than we ever had, but that data is unclear, right? It's complex. There's so much to it. So what we're going to focus on is, what do we need to do to get adaptable? Now, when we think about Agile, we talk a lot about shortening the feedback loop, right? And you guys have heard that. Our goal is to shorten the feedback loop, shorten the feedback loop. But when you think about that, who have we really shortened the feedback loop to? When we think about most Agile implementations, what I see a lot of times is we've shortened the feedback loop with you, right? With the product owners, right? So that's great. We're getting a faster feedback of the teams going off and building something. We're getting something to provide feedback to, right? But we might be getting faster feedback loop at the sprint review, right? Who do you invite to the sprint review? So if the sprint review is only the team and you, we're maybe missing one piece. A better would be that we're inviting some of our business stakeholders and other stuff. But what I see in most Agile implementations is we've shortened the feedback loop with stakeholders. What we haven't done a good job of in the Agile world is shorten the feedback loop with customers, right? Most of the time what's happening is we're getting feedback every 2 weeks, but I could ask, how many people here actually have customers that they're getting feedback from every 2 weeks? And that number is probably not going to be really high. There's probably a couple of you that have that, and maybe it's an internal. It's easier when it's an internal customer, right? Like somebody internal that actually uses the product. But if you've got a externally used, it's really hard to say every 2 weeks we're going to have actual customers in our sprint review. Most of us don't do that, right? So mostly what we've done is shorten the feedback loop with internal stakeholders, and we have not shortened the feedback loop with the market, with our customers. And those are the techniques that we're going to talk about today. Because most of Agile, when we think about Agile adoption, are very delivery focused. We think about Scrum, we think about SAFe, we think about, even DevOps and user stories, test automation. These are all things that are trying to get us to deliver faster, right? But the question is, are we delivering the right thing, right? We're maybe delivering a lot of wrong things faster because we're focused so much on just optimizing the flow of value. But as product owners, you guys have a really tough job. Your job is to make a bet every day. Every day you're making a bet with the company's money on, is this the right investment or is this the right investment? What's the thing we should work on next? That's a bet. Every one of those things is a bet that we're making. And if I was a product owner, which I actually do play a product owner at times, what I want as a product owner is I want to be able to make smaller bets, and I want to be able to get feedback and validation or invalidation of my ideas as fast as possible. Right? I want to know if I'm making the right bets, and I don't want to wait $5 million later to know if I made the right bet. I don't want to wait months later till I know if I made the right bet. I want to know as quick as possible if I made the right bet. So the delivery focus of Agile, while great because it's leaner, it's more efficient, it's more effective or faster at getting value out the door, what we really need to focus on is a different kind of feedback. And so what I want to look at is, often this is the process that we follow. We have an idea, it's brilliant, we think it's brilliant, and so we take that idea, we give it to the team goes and builds it, and then we deliver a product, right? And the question I have for you is that the finish line? I think most of the time we think the finish line is that we delivered it into production and it didn't blow up, right? It's in production, we're done, right? And the build worked, it didn't blow up production, we deployed with no errors. All right, that's our finish line, but that's not actually our finish line. So the question is, when we deliver this product, do we actually get feedback, and does that feedback integrate into future ideas? So what we've done, again, delivery focus, in most of our organizations, we've optimized, take an idea, deliver it as a product, then grab the next idea, deliver it as a product, take the next idea, deliver it as a product. And our job as product owners is create a backlog of a bunch of great ideas. But the question, are we getting feedback that we're building the right things? So the question I have for you is, how do you know you're building the right thing? And at what point do you know that you built the right thing, right? Just because it's in production doesn't mean it's the right thing, right? How are you collecting data to know, like, say we built this feature, we think it's going to drive revenue up. Are we measuring that, right? After we deliver it to production? Is it making the impact that we thought it would? So a user story is good about saying, what's the thing we should go build? And it helps with acceptance criteria for teams to know, okay, what's the criteria of completeness? But that criteria often stops when it hits production, right? It's like, we did all the things, it does all the functionality, so the functionality is deployed. And so I want to focus us more on, how do we know we're building the right thing, and how can we shrink the time to know that we're actually building the right things? So the gist of the video, right, I think everybody probably got, which is here's this team and they're saying, we don't know exactly what features we need. And think about the hard job is always put on our shoulders as product owners. You got to have all the answers. You need to know exactly what it is that we need to build. And in this case, they said, we don't know. So what's the best way for us to do this? Try and guess at all those things, go work for weeks and build something and then get feedback? The issue is every one of you have a polarized lens problem in your backlog right now. And if you caught that in the video, they found out by testing that if they were wearing polarized lenses in the iPad was one direction, it blacked it all out. And the challenge is in our normal feedback loops for our teams, or in the way we work for our products, is that we go build a bunch of stuff. We deliver, 3 months, we deliver a big package of like 20 features, we put them in production, and then we wait to see what are our main metrics. Did revenue go up? Did the support line not ring, ring less? Then we must have done a good job. And the reality is that's not a good measure. And we have great tools at our disposal in terms of analytics and other things about where is everybody clicking. I mean, there's tools to show where are people looking on your page, right? And where are they bouncing off of the pages? And all of that data is there. It's not almost, it is too much. But we have a way to determine, are people actually using the features we build? But let's think about this word for a second, this word that we use and throw around a lot, a requirement. Think about, what does that word mean to you? Like, it's a requirement, right? Like it sounds like a fixed factual thing. It's a requirement. It must be true, right? But like I said earlier, everything we do is a bet. So every requirement you have in your backlog is a guess. Every requirement we have is a guess that we think if we build it, it will deliver some value. If we build it, our customers will respond in a certain way. Everything is a guess, and some have more risk than others. And I think if at a minimum, if you just put a question mark at the end of every user story that you wrote, right? As a frequent flyer, I want to rebook a past trip so that I can save time booking trips I take, right? It's like, it's a question that we're posing that we think that frequent flyers want to save time, right? We think that if they save time, we'll get more revenue by giving that feature to frequent flyers. But it's not a given, but we write it as a requirement, right? And we write all that stuff out. And so I want to challenge that statement, because a lot of us have probably seen this stat before, that more than half of the features we build are rarely or never used. And while that's scary in itself, the scariest part is most of us as product owners don't know which half are the ones that are rarely or never used. So what's the cost? Think about, what's the cost of having half of your features being rarely or never used? The half of the features that are in production in your product today are rarely or never used. What's the cost of that, right? The cost of maintaining it, right? Maintaining the code, maintaining the quality. Your QA team has a regression test for all those features that are rarely or never used. That's why your release cycles take so long, because we got to test all those things. We got to maintain all those tests. What happens to the complexity of the code when it doubles? It doesn't just get twice as complex, right? It gets exponentially more complex. So when is the last time, I challenge you as a product owner, when's the last time you put in your backlog a requirement to remove a feature from your product? And think about, if you actually went and removed functionality from your product, it would actually speed up the development time of future features, right? It would speed it up because it would reduce the complexity. It would improve the user experience. The user experience is bloated because we have all these extra features. I mean, think about Microsoft Office, right? There is so much in there that none of us use, and it makes it really hard to find the thing that we want to do, right? Because there's so much that's in there. So we need to think about making better bets. And the way to do that isn't by just being smarter. It isn't by doing more analysis. It's by breaking the work down and running faster experiments, right? It's by testing things quicker and getting feedback on it, just like in the video, where they were releasing one feature at a time. They were just trading out the laptop, the iPad. They were releasing even multiple times a day and getting feedback instantly from customers, not just, it deployed, right? So what we want to focus on is balancing not just delivery and speed of delivery, which we talked about that Agile really focuses on, but also focusing on discovery. Are we discovering the right features to build, the right way to build them, the right functionality, the things that our customers really are going to love, right? The minimal lovable feature. What is the thing that we need to build? And so we have techniques that come from Lean Startup, from user story mapping by Jeff Patton, design thinking, Lean UX, and experiment-driven development. And we're gonna talk through some of these today, mostly on the experiment-driven side of that. And but if you're not familiar with user story mapping, I highly encourage you to get Jeff Patton's book and read more about that, or Jeff Godhelf's book around Lean UX, and we'll send you links to that as well. So we're going to look at the discovery, and when we think about discovery, we still have that idea, build it in product, but it fills in some missing pieces to this loop, right? We're not done at this point. At this point, we need to measure how is that feature performing in production? Is it doing the things that we thought it would do? Is it influencing our users the way we thought it would? We take that data and we learn from it, right? And so we call this the build, measure, learn loop. This comes from Lean Startup. We're building, we're measuring, we're learning, and the learning feeds into the next idea. And we start using objective data to prioritize our backlog. Think about when you prioritize your backlog today and you get a bunch of stakeholders in the room, are we using objective data? We typically aren't, right? It's all subjective. I feel this is the highest priority thing. My analysis shows, and while you might have used objective data, it's still a guess and a hunch, as opposed to, there's a story that goes that in Amazon, somebody had a big idea. And they went to Jeff Bezos and they said, I've got this great idea. It's going to make us millions of dollars. I need $500,000 to build it. And Jeff Bezos said, okay, put a link on the homepage. And he's like, oh, well, we haven't built it yet. What do you mean? Put a link on the homepage. He's like, well, where would that link go? He said, just 404 error page. Just put a link on the homepage with what you're proposing. And they did. And nobody clicked the link. Do they need to build it? Right? So there's tests of like running an experiment of just putting a Google ad to a dummy landing page and see if anybody clicks it and finds it, and spend $100 on a Google ad and see if anybody finds it. Don't even put your company's logo or anything around it. Just like, does it drive any traffic? Is somebody interested in that feature? Is anybody searching for it? What's the smallest experiment? Running a $100 test. Man, if you could make $100 investment on every feature in your backlog, and you would get data that week if that feature was going to be good or not, man, that would save you millions of dollars, right? So we've got to focus on the learning loop with objective data. How can we run a test and get feedback from our customers, not feedback from stakeholders, that we're building the right thing? That's what we want to focus on. So the goal isn't just shortening the feedback loop, but shortening the learning cycle, the learning loop, right? And tying that all the way together. So here's where, when I talk about, the title that's a little provocative, right? User stories suck. The biggest thing that I think a user story misses is, why would we as a business build this feature? It's missing an objective. What is the goal? Right, I mentioned a user story I use in my product owner classes. As a frequent flyer, I want to rebook a past trip so I can save time booking trips I take, right? So that's a valid user story. But what it doesn't tell our team is, why are we building it? Why are we investing in this? What is success? Success isn't just that we've allowed the frequent flyers to, book their trips faster. Success is actually that we're getting more business from frequent flyers, right? So there's a missing objective of we see the frequent flyer market as a big part of our base, or we want to grow it. We're trying to increase our market share of the frequent flyer market. That's our objective. And then the next thing is, what's our hypothesis? Our hypothesis is if we can make it easier and faster for frequent flyers to book, then they will book more business with us. That's a hypothesis. That's not a requirement, right? It's a hypothesis that if we actually save them time, they will book more with us. And then the next question is, what's the smallest experiment that we could go run to validate or invalidate our hypothesis, right? The smallest experiment may be pre-populate the to and from with the last trip that they took and see if that saves them time and that they start booking more with it. Like, what's the smallest experiment we could do? And think about what you would unlock in your team in terms of innovation and ideas if you started with just an objective and a hypothesis and let them partner with you to figure out what are the smallest experiments we could do. Right? And so that's what we're going to look at, is we're going to break this down and talk about how do we write objectives, how do we write hypotheses, and how do we define experiments. So one tool that we can use is a template there's a new kind of way of defining more strategic goals that's called OKRs. And OKRs, invented by Intel, made famous by Google, and pretty much everybody in Silicon Valley is using OKRs in place of strategic planning, because planning, multi-year strategic planning, how's that holding up for your companies right now in this right? It's like all bust, right? OKRs are very focused on 90 days. What are we trying to achieve in the next 90 days? But I'm not saying go implement a OKR strategic planning process. I'm saying, well, let's use this template and take in our product world and define what are the objectives we have and what are the key results that we have for some of the features that we're trying to build. So the objective is just meant to be a short, inspiring kind of like title, but the key results are meant to be very objective in terms of, and not activity-based, more outcome-based. So not, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, which is what a user story would do, right? Build this, build this, build this. We're gonna focus on the outcomes. If we build those things, we would see, frequent flyer repeat business increase by 20%, quarter over quarter, right? That would be a key result, right? That's what we want to articulate in terms of an objective, is what are we trying to get on the outside of it? So what I'm going to ask you to do in this next exercise is to think about what's something in your backlog today, right, that you have as a user story or an epic or an initiative or a feature. Think about something that's in your backlog today. And I want you to try and turn it into an objective. So you've got a little bit of a canvas space there. If you're having trouble with Mural, you can just use a Post-it and a pad that's sitting in front of you. You don't have to use Mural for this. But I want you to write down and try and define an objective. I have this epic. Why does it exist? It exists because it's going to help the business. How? What is the objective? And the key results, I would know it's helping the business because we would see these objective outcomes, right? So try and create like 2 or 3 key results underneath that objective. I've left on the canvas a template for you and just a little example, and it doesn't need to be perfect. So I saw, again, it's a new muscle, it's a new thing, and we're learning, right? A couple hints as you've been practicing. Again, the thing that a difference between an OKR and a story that'll be a little bit of a change of habit is I saw some OKRs that I think look like really good stories and acceptance criteria. And in the way that I would say that they were more stories than OKRs, where they were like, we would build this, we would build this, we would build this. It does this function, it does this function, it does this function, which is kind of more acceptance criteria, which is a good story. But here on an OKR, and I've left this board up a little bit, and I'll read one. There's some in here that I think are really hitting the mark on. It's about the outcomes. So there's one around depositing checks anywhere, anytime. So we would know that it was successful because we've seen an increase in deposits, and ideally we, I'm not expecting you to get there today, but you'd say like increase of 10% in deposits, so something you can measure. Increase adoption of mobile banking, reducing customer loss, right? Like, and you get to that very specific outcome that you're not, while writing the OKR, you don't know exactly how you're going to build it and how you're going to get there, and you're going to iterate and experiment towards it. Another one that I thought was good was, customer complaints for late shipments down 20% in 3 months, right? Like, again, it's something very measurable. It's an outcome. It's not saying go build these 3 features, right? Go build this functionality. We still will probably write stories for that, even though my talk says user stories suck. We still probably will write stories for the things we're going to implement, but an OKR around that scope can help us from an objective perspective. Okay, feel free to roam on the board as well to look at what other examples of what folks wrote. And let me switch back to the slides here. Okay, so the next step is taking an objective and breaking it down into a hypothesis. And I mentioned that earlier, like with a hypothesis is if we can save people time. So I've given you a little bit of a template, just kind of like we have the, as a, I want, so that for a user story. Here's a template for a hypothesis, right? If we do X, then Y% of our customers will behave in way Z. That's a hypothesis that if we do X, then we will get this reaction. And we'll know it by the behavior, right? What we're trying, and how we're going to measure that. And so what I'm going to have you do is pick one of the objectives that one of your teammates wrote. Just pick one of those to narrow your focus, and one that everybody can kind of understand. And take that one objective and work together, brainstorm, and try and come up with at least 2 hypothesis statements, right? And it doesn't have to fit exactly this template for right now, but for that objective, and we could take like that banking one. What is a hypothesis of how we would improve on those scores, or the customer satisfaction one, right? Like, take one objective from your team and break that down into 1 to 2 hypothesis statements. Everybody good on what we're gonna do? Okay, all right. Back to your teams. Andy, take it away.
Hey, David, a quick question.
Yep.
What if there is a conflict within the customer groups, meaning you have one set of customer groups or segments whose objectives and needs are in direct, if not direct, somewhat conflicting with a different customer group or segment?
Right. So, I mean, I think for as from a product perspective, I'm assuming you're trying to serve both, right? So you're not trying to alienate one, right? So your statement is inferring that you're trying to balance and say, like, we're doing something. So the question is, do you provide different solutions for that, right? Are they different interfaces? Are they, how are you going to provide and serve both customer groups? Is it a priority or is it not? And right now, you may say this quarter, our focus is on trying to increase, but you may put a key result that's a balancing metric. We want to increase our frequent flyers by not losing more, in our family bookings, right? And so you sometimes could have a balancing metric in your key result that would make sure that you're focusing on that. But yeah, but you would want to look at it that way.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Sure. So I'm gonna point at this one again, since it's right in the middle. So good hypothesis here, like if we add mobile deposit capability to our mobile banking app, an additional 25% of our customers will download the app, right? That's a hypothesis. If we add mobile deposit, we think we will get more people interacting using our app, right? So again, we're looking for the hypothesis, and you could think about stories that you've written in the past and reword them into a hypothesis statement, right? We think if we would save frequent flyers time, then they'll book more with us. So the next thing, remember we had objective, then hypothesis, then the next thing we need to think about is our experiment. And what you've got, let me just show you on the canvas. So you've got an area down here, and you've got a 5 yellow Post-its that are titles, types of experiments that we could run, 5 green ones that are descriptions, and 5 pictures here. And what you're trying to do is group. There's one title that goes with 1 green description that goes with 1 picture. So as a team, you can grab and drag and drop those around. So as a team, you've got 3 minutes to work together to try and talk through and figure out where the matches are. All right, it looks like we're getting everybody back. I have zoomed in on, actually, that's a good question. I don't know what team. This one looks to be right. So if you were wondering which ones go with which ones. So what you're seeing there are a set of different types of experiments that we could run, right? Everybody's probably familiar with A/B testing. We saw paper prototyping in the video. But then there's some other things here. And I want to share with you just a story. Let's see if I can get to the right. There we go. So we looked at that one. Everybody's familiar with Dropbox. Red mentioned it earlier. When it first launched, it launched as a video. There was a video that explained how it worked, and this is before we had all these devices and the cloud. And it was magical. You had one computer, you installed this, you had another computer, it magically copied the file, you edited it, it magically updated. And they had this video and it showed how it worked. And at the end of it, it said, click here if you're interested. And I was like, hell yeah. And it said, give us your email address, which I was like, okay. And I gave them the email and it said, we'll let you know when we build it. Like there was no app. They didn't have a beta, right? And they were using the video to see if people would be interested. They had a hypothesis that there was a problem space that they think they could solve, and they used the video to see if people were interested. Another story is an app for tracking your runs, and all of a sudden one day a camera icon showed up. And I was like, I'm running, why is there a camera icon? But I clicked it and it said, would you like to take pictures on your run? And I clicked, no, I don't want to take pictures on a run. And they said, thank you. They had not figured out how to write the whole camera functionality. All they did was put a camera icon and a survey question behind it to test. And a lot of times these tests don't go out to 100% of our user base. These tests go out to 5% of our user base, and we may put it out there for 2 weeks and then take the test back and hide the icon again. So again, what can you do in your product, in your app to test, right? Like the one that was the mobile banking, like what if maybe a test is that we just put this link of like, I can, upload a check and see if people click it. And again, you say, all right, thank you for showing your interest. We'll work on that feature, right? So what experiments can we run? The Google ads, the link on the home page, building a dummy landing page. What experiments can we run that measure real behavior, don't just confirm our biases, and include ways to capture surprises that are objective, right? Not just user testing, right, as an example of something we do. And don't go ask user surveys and say, would you like this feature? Oh, you would? Okay, great. Right? You have to do things like, will you give me $100 for this feature right now? Right? And then that's going to really tell you objectively if somebody's willing to invest in it. So the last exercise that I want you to do is take one of the hypotheses you wrote and think about what are some experiments. And in this, you don't need to write it out in any magic statement, just like what are a couple different just Post-its, just putting Post-its out there. What experiments, what quick experiment, what's the smallest thing you could build to get through the learning loop, right, for that hypothesis without building the whole feature, without having to take 3 months to go build it. All right, last exercise and then we'll wrap up. All right, So here's just a template. This comes from the Lean UX book of how to potentially write an experiment, right? We believe that doing this for these people, so we see some of our personas, we see some of the value, like a user story, we will achieve this outcome, we will know this is true, and then we have some objective way that we're measuring that. And so then these are ways that we could take the experiments that you had and write it in a way that we're, you know, are we getting all the elements in there? So ultimately, what we're talking about here is we've got a balance, right? We've got to balance discovery and delivery. We can't just be focused on faster, faster, faster and building all the wrong things. We've got to also focus on, are we testing and learning and balancing those elements. And depending on where your product is, you know, in terms of how much is known, how much, if you're just doing like maintenance features or Me Too features with a product, and it's, you know, then maybe you are focused more on delivery. There's other times if you're a brand new product to a new space, then you should be, you know, a startup should be totally like 90% discovery and 10% on delivery, right? They should be testing in there. But if you've got even a legacy product and you're testing some new thing, you need to balance some discovery. So what I want to leave you with, your homework, is what are ways that you can shorten your feedback loop and, more importantly, your learning cycle for the product that you are in charge of? How can you start making smaller bets and getting more objective data to inform your next decisions about what's the next highest thing in your backlog? Sorry we went a little long. The switching in between and getting everybody back from the breakout rooms ended up taking a little bit longer than I thought. We'll send you the video, so for those that had trouble kind of hearing that. If you're interested in more information and us kind of sending this package, you can either drop a post-it at the bottom of the mural, bottom of your section, just with your name and email, so we can send stuff to you. We'll get out the slides, we'll get out the links to the videos. Also, even though I normally do certified Scrum product owner classes in Austin, as you'd imagine, we've made all of those virtual. So on May 19th, I'll be doing this section. This is actually one of the modules in the class. So if you liked this type of learning experience, so we'll send you a discount code and a link to that class if you're interested. And yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed it.